Welcome to a special edition of Don at the Dome. It is February of 2026, which means what? The state legislature is in session, and with us we have special guest John Carson. And you, Don, and I have like this special connection. You were first elected in 2011.
Correct.
That's when we started to really ramp up more of our legislative activities, and Don rolled into his role that he's in now as VP of Legislative Affairs. It also happens to be when I started at the Georgia Society.
Yeah.
So we go way back. John, you have been a blessing to us in this profession.
Thank you.
And being here today just continues that. So thank you. We're going to get into some tax legislation, maybe at the very end, but we're here to talk about conformity and to hear you guys kind of go back and forth on the status of that. But is there anything off the jump you guys want to say or mention before we dive into it?
I remember first running for office after spending a number of years at, I came up through KPMG, and I was also at GE Capital and for a little bit at SunTrust. And I remember getting a call from either you or Don not long after I was elected. And I think I was, the third CPA or fourth CPA at the time, behind a few others.
That's right.
And said, no, pleasure to be here. It's kind of a busy time of year. And my wife reminds me of it, being in legislature and obviously running my practice, selling the federal and state tax credits. But it's a blessing.
It's funny. I have been in offices like around the state where I'm meeting with members or whatever, and we were actually in Athens when this happened, and it's happened a few times where we're sitting there talking to them, and the front desk person or whatever will come in and go, "Hey, John Carson's on the phone for you," not for us, but for the other practitioners. So we know you know this state as well as anybody.
I remember that call. I remember that firm. Yeah.
So, yeah. All right, Don, anything you want to?
Just Don Cook. I mean, I think we all know each other at this point. We finished up Legislative Day 18 yesterday. Today is a day off for the legislature. Monday is also a day off. Then back in the grind next week for 4 days.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day.
That's right. Happy Valentine's Day.
So day 19 is going to be Tuesday next week. So
correct.
Nice long weekend for y'all, which is nice to get away for a few days.
Around the banking holiday too, yeah.
All right, so there's a little one we can hit on, an easy one. So it's day 19 of session. And just for those that don't know, how many days does session go?
We go for 40 calendar days. We always start on the second Monday of January. And I live in Cobb County. Fortunately for me, the legislature seems to wrap up before Cobb County spring break, Cherokee County spring break. What I typically tell people is my good friend Brian Kemp has tickets to the Masters. So I assure you, Boyd, we are done. Okay, we are done before the first full week of April. We have priorities.
Governor Kemp knows what he's doing, doesn't he?
Exactly. Yes, sir, he does.
All right. All right.
Important days out there. We have a crossover day on March 6th. Which is coming up. So obviously all the bills that are being considered in the House and the Senate, conversely, they have to cross over by that day. Otherwise, they're going to be dead.
Yep,
so,
correct.
Okay.
For the entire 2-year term.
Right.
Wow. Yeah. That makes sense. Okay. All right. So let's dive into conformity. And why don't you explain what the conformity bill is real quick, and then I'll get into some questions.
Yeah.
So as everyone knows, Georgia has an income tax that we require Georgia taxpayers to pay, and it is mostly married off, not fully, but mostly varies off the Internal Revenue Code as of certain dates. And so what we have to do every year, it's a housekeeping measure usually, is basically adjust the dates in our Title 48, our revenue code here in Georgia, to make sure that our revenue, that our income tax provisions apply mostly, are in conformity mostly with the Internal Revenue Code as it stated, as it was in effect for tax year 25.
Don, what's that do for our members that are in tax and their clients and stuff?
It causes them a great deal of anxiety and stress. States do it differently. So you've got some states that auto-conform through statute. I actually do like the way that our state does it because it forces them to look down and look at all the changes that have been made federally in the previous year and decide whether it's fiscally responsible to conform to them or not. So they actually have that conversation. But I do know it stresses our members out greatly because they're looking at the tax year that you're currently working on. So This year, we're conforming to changes that were made in 2025, so that obviously has a big impact on your tax season. And if the state decides to conform differently than we have in the past, that's obviously going to also cause some stress and anxiety. So, yeah.
All right, so question, sort of in two parts, two questions. What makes this year's conformity bill more time-sensitive than usual? And what happens administratively if it passes late?
What we're working on right now is what this year's conformity bill is, has a lot of changes that are generated or that have to be considered in state law in regard to what was put into federal law by the One Big Beautiful Bill. And those had a significant cost. As you know, in Georgia, we have a balanced budget requirement, and so we have to balance our budget every single year. And if we look at the IRC conformity and we adopt everything, we could have a very substantial problem with regard to a lack of revenues. And I appreciate what you said, Don, about, we take a look at it every year in regard to what can we do and what can we not do and what have you. And I know it's painstaking, particularly for practitioners, but we do have a responsibility to balance our budget.
Anything to add to that?
Yeah, I do. So when we're looking at what happens administratively if it passes late, I think the concerns around late passage are, especially if you're going to make changes over how you have conformed in previous years, the later you get into session in terms of it passing, the more question marks that are going to arise, the more worry about tax certainty are going to come up. And so you've got tax software providers that are scrambling to decide on how they're going to conform to, question mark changes that may or may not happen. So the reality starts to set in that there's just a large amount of unknown, which could lead to more extensions being filed. It could lead to, potentially if you veer off the course of how you've conformed in previous years, you could look at, some people refiling or doing amended returns, which is always a problem for the State Department of Revenue because then it's double filing. So,
all right. So I'm going to be honest. I have I'm so used to referring to bills as HB 148.
Right.
Okay. It's got 3 digits. A lot of the bills we've worked with, especially the ones we talk a lot about, are 3 digits. And this is HB 1199. And I have been tripping over that until, John, before we started, you said 1199. And I was like, oh, why have I not done that? That is, so HB 1199 is the conformity bill. Thanks you. Yeah. So finally I can get that to roll off the tongue a lot easier. But what's the expected timeline on this? Do we have?
From a legislative standpoint, the bill has already passed Ways and Means Committee. We do have one tweak to make, one correction, but we're going to do that in House rules. I'm expecting and am told that we very well may see a Georgia House floor vote on this next week.
Okay.
I'm hoping either Tuesday or Wednesday.
Yeah.
And to send it immediately over to the Georgia Senate. I've already teed up my our good friend, Chairman of Senate Finance, Chuck Hufstatler, who obviously works quite a bit with Chairman Billy Hickman, our other CPA friend over in the Senate. They understand the priority. They understand the urgency. And I'm sure, I'm sure they understand that and will be acting accordingly.
So, what are the biggest differences between this year's bill and last year's bill, and particularly the new federal worker income provisions? Where are we at?
Yeah, so many times what we do, particularly if there's not many tax changes in D.C., we just change the dates for any kind of cleanup language and we move forward. When we looked at, and this is one of the causes for why this has taken a couple more weeks than it has in prior years. If we were to adopt all of the changes in Section 179, 168, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, to the thresholds that the federal bill considered, the cost would have been in the billions.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Literally.
Yep.
And keep in mind, the federal government, and again, I might say this several times on this podcast, we have a requirement to balance our budget. The federal government does not. As it's currently structured, there is if the bill were to pass as is, there would continue to be a Georgia tax on tips. There would be a continued tax on overtime. And there would not be the ability to deduct car loan interest in Georgia either.
Okay.
I know that's not what people want to hear, but again, we're acting fiscally responsible in a fiscally responsible fashion, and moving it forward as quickly as we can.
I've heard many, many times that the perfect bill is when nobody's happy about it. So with that being said, I think this is a perfect bill, and I think you're going to have people that want winners and losers in different areas.
Right.
And so I think this is, without a doubt, falls in that capacity. So
It's well
I can
said.
make everybody happy.
All right, let's see here. Are there any provisions in this year's bill that could meaningfully change, how CPAs prepare returns compared to last filing season?
I think you're going to see some differences in regard to casualty loss deductions and miscellaneous expenses, itemized deductions, changes to the child and dependent care credit, and so forth. A lot of the changes that we are conforming to are on the individual side, except for the tax on tips and the tax on overtime, and we're not going to allow a deduction for car loan interest. But honestly, rest of the provisions that we were needing to consider out of the One Big Beautiful Bill actually have been adopted for individuals. It was those three items plus the business expenses, the business expensing in 168 and certain parts of 179 that was also very expensive.
I would also look to socials because John has actually shared a summary of the changes that are being proposed in the IRC update bill, House Bill 1199. And so we'll obviously post these as well. Thank you very much for putting that together and sharing it with us, because that's very, very helpful.
If the bill were delayed, so we have multiple audiences or constituencies for conformity, right? You've got taxpayers, tax preparers, but you also have the Department of Revenue, who has to administer all of this stuff. So if the bill were delayed, what practical consequences would all of those parties, together or individually, experience?
I think without a doubt, delaying the bill causes a kind of a downhill slide effect, because you have tax practitioners that are working with their clients, obviously, and they're trying to do the right thing by them. And so they're going to hold these returns to later in session. And then we're going to see some either last minute filing, or we're going to see amended returns being filed, depending on changes that are made, which is only going to serve to clog up the Department of Revenue and processing time. So it definitely has that downhill effect, which is it's the downside of doing conformity the way we do it here in the state of Georgia. But again, I can't say enough. Just the fact that they stop and they look at all the federal changes and they make a individual decision on every single change. I do think it's a smart way to do it, even though it does cause this scrambling.
I would agree. It does have job security for you, but it actually, it does allow us to go, I said that in front of your employees.
That's right, totally.
But it does allow us to go item by item to say, is this fiscally prudent?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
As opposed to an all or nothing type of approach.
Right.
And Boyd, I just wanted to say I know people that are asking me these questions. They've asked you guys questions in regard to when's the conformity bill going to pass? We need it done and so forth. We are working as quickly as possible within the legislative guidelines and within a balanced budget requirement. But I will also say that we understand that once we pass this measure, whatever it looks like, when I think it's going to look like this, that's not the end of the story, because CCH and Intuit and Lacert and so many other software providers are going to have to update their software. Right. So practitioners all over Georgia and people outside of Georgia that are doing Georgia returns can accurately do those returns and submit them to our Department of Revenue.
Right. Yeah, I do. I want to emphasize your point about process and timing, because I think, if you're an outsider and you don't necessarily know the process for drafting and passing legislation, it can at times, particularly with a bill like this, look like, well, why are they dragging their feet? Why isn't it happening quickly? And there are so many different reasons that a bill can pass quickly or can slow down. And the point I want to make is that having John, having David Wilkerson, having Billy Hickman, formerly David Knight, right, as well, and involved in all this. You guys fully understand how important it is to get this through, and it's never because, well, we're just doing something else, right? It's if it does feel like it's slow, it's never because we don't know and you don't know that this is a priority, and so. We have a lot of stories we could tell over the years for why conformity has maybe been slowed or whatever, and oftentimes it has nothing to do with conformity, right? It's because there are just other priorities or other things going on or whatever.
And most years when we make that, and you mentioned this earlier, when you make that simple date change, so most years when it's a simple conformity bill, and that's the only thing you're doing is changing dates, even that bill doesn't pass until close to tax season. I mean, get signed into law. So
I've seen some of the IRSC conformity bills not be signed until
after
several days after March 15th, after the partnership returns are due. And incredibly frustrating. But we don't operate as a think tank. We operate as a legislative body to represent the entire state, including our membership.
Yep. And I really want to emphasize that point that you guys fully understand all of that, right? Yeah. Okay. Looking forward, these federal provisions, right, that we are adopting some and not others, are they likely to continue debate into next year? Like, how do we see this all unfolding over the next few years as it relates to those provisions?
I probably study federal, but I do.
I think if we had conformed to tips, if we had conformed to overtime, if we had conformed to the interest deduction over auto loans, I think then you're looking at a situation where you're going to have to pay attention to conformity 3 years down the road because those provisions would expire. And I know that was part of their conversation was, does it make sense to conform?
Federally they expire.
Right, federally they expire.
Yep.
So
yes.
Does it make sense as a state to conform to something that's only going to be around for 3 years? And so without a doubt, that's part of that conversation. But I think, as we've mentioned a number of times, I mean, conformity, this is going to be a conversation every single year. And every single year, the bill is going to get filed, as quickly as possible. It's going to get discussed. It's going to get debated.
Right.
It's going to move from the House to the Senate, and it's going to pass at some point during session, and it's not going to happen in a timely fashion. They try to do it as a timely a fashion as possible. But it's just not going to be quick enough or fast enough. And most years, again, where there is not a big change, it's not an issue because the tax software providers just kind of auto-conform to what they think is going to happen. And so it just winds up not being a problem.
Right.
So it's only when there's changes like around Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and now with big changes around.
Bill.
Yeah. Yep. So.
All right. So do you guys do you think we've hit conformity? Is there anything else that we maybe didn't touch on, or anything you want to reemphasize?
I just want to emphasize that we fully understand the urgency, but we're working within the parameters of a legislative process and a balanced budget.
Yeah.
The bill has already passed Ways and Means. It's sitting in House Rules. It's going to be called up for a vote. I believe sometime next week. I believe it'll be in the Senate by Friday afternoon.
That's fantastic.
Maybe as early as Tuesday or Wednesday.
Okay.
And again, the Senate has already been teed up. There are, and I'll just mention this, Boyd, we know that there are several other tax bills being discussed in Georgia. But I would argue,
really?
much like the budget, this has to pass. Right. Or else we're really going to have a lot of problems with Department of Revenue and being compliant as taxpayers.
So do you guys want to, we won't have time to go deep into them, but do you want to talk about the other ideas that are floating out there or bills that are floating out there just as a frame of reference for folks?
I can think of 4 major tax initiatives. This one has to pass, but it's obviously not the sexiest and getting the best headlines.
Yeah.
You have the Senate making an effort, and actually it passed yesterday on their side, to exclude the first $50,000 for single and $100,000 for married, filing joint from state income tax. Our House, on our side, the Georgia House is working to greatly reduce, if not eliminate homestead property taxes. We keep hearing from so many people that there is a measurement in order to calculate sales tax. There is a measurement to calculate income tax. I remember taking advanced taxation at Georgia State where we talked about the wherewithal to pay. You don't have that with property tax. It's just an asset. It's just a piece of property and with an arbitrary value. And if there's any tax that I hear of, that others hear of, that is most unpopular, that people just absolutely do not want to pay, and they argue with, it is the property tax. And then you have other tax bills that we were talking about earlier about in regard to how hard the timber industry has been hit in the Savannah area.
Hard, yeah.
And we're talking about a timber or lumber, a timber tax credit of sorts to revitalize that industry. We've got a lot of things that we're discussing at the Gold Dome.
Absolutely. Big year for tax. And the governor has some proposals too on the tax side where he's got the tax rebates again, where he wants to have the $250 for individual filers, $500 for joint filers. So he's got that proponent out there too, and then dropping the rate to be more in line with our neighbor states down to the 4.99. So I know those are bills that are coming out from his floor leaders.
Correct. Correct.
Well, from this side of the table, I would tell you, listening to you guys, even though we have areas in Georgia or industries, timber, where there is a struggle, there is so much opportunity because of how well I think we are set up and the work that does happen at the State House, because we have opportunities to solve those problems and leverage other opportunities. But to your point earlier in this conversation, that ultimately all comes when nobody's happy, right? And that usually sets up the best environment. And
I would also add in regard to the tax on tips, the things the major items that we're not conforming to, and that's taking the most time in regards to the debate, the costs, and what have you. Tax on tips, tax on overtime, and the changes in 168, 179. If you take all those and you look at the 4 or 5 year period at which we're looking at lost revenue, if we adopted all of those changes in the revenue costs, that would cause us to have to raise our income tax rate. I would argue probably another 0.1%. And so as frustrating as this process is, what we're trying to do is lower the tax burden for all Georgians across the state.
Well, gentlemen, thank you both. John, I know that in doing what you do for a living with tax credits and stuff, you don't do taxes, but you are fully aware of the impact of all of this, right?
I am,
on people and the economy, and like I said earlier, that continues to be a blessing for the state and for us. So thank you. And Don, you pound a lot of miles down on those hard, what are they, marble
floors?
Marble floors.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, the more guys get older down there, I see them wearing tennis shoes and stuff because it's like the leather dress shoes.
It makes a lot more sense than the dress shoes.
It really does, doesn't it?
Like the tennis dress shoes, they help.
Well, and every year I'm so busy around tax season because of legislature. My wife reminds me that I begged for this legislative job. So.
You do. Every 2 years, in fact. You're both doing a great job, and we are so thankful for each one of you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
That's it for another episode of Don at the Dome.
Thank you.